exchanges with Doc Romy. I told him on one of my texts kung malapit lang siya, I would have visited him every day. Sadly, since 2015 when my family moved to the US, Doc Romy and I never had a chance to see each other here in the US. We would talk about it and plan to see each other. I remember him saying maybe it's best for him to move to Florida where I live kasi the weather's good. Kahit sa seniors facility na lang siya tumira, total, dadalawin ko naman daw siya. And I said, of course, magdadrive kita, Doc, punta tayo ng beach. He lived for many years in Seattle and longed for warmer weather. That's why whenever he had the chance, he would fly back to Manila. Maybe many would wonder how Doc Romy and I formed this special friendship between us. We were both PCU UHSN alumni, but 20 years apart. I was first introduced to Doc Romy by Angel and Foxo, who was the alumni coordinator back in 2009, the year that I became the secretary for the Alumni Association. Doc Romy was already an entertainment columnist in several Filipino newspapers here in the US, and he was in the process of writing his book, Balik Tanaw, a memoir of loved and respected movie stars from the 60s. He needed an editor, and Angel introduced me to him. A partnership was born since then. I became not just the editor for his book, but also for his articles that he submitted to the Filipino newspapers here, like One Philippines. He would occasionally ask me to review his letters to public officials in Manila, his resume, his job application letters. One day he told me he was thinking of retiring, but parang meron pa siyang gustong gawin. I told him maybe you need to analyze what is your passion that you haven't focused on for many years. Sabi niya, passion niya is always to give back because he has always felt that God's been so good to him. He asked me if he can still change careers, maybe start teaching. He knew I taught English in Bangkok and Manila and asked me how he could go back to teaching. After all, he had a doctorate in teaching English as a second language. I told him it should be easy for you to start teaching again. I recommended teaching online so he doesn't have to drive. I showed him the pathway where and how to get his certificate in teaching English, how to get his teaching license. I was giving all this information as a friend, but was not really convinced that he would take the effort to start teaching again. After all, he was looking forward to going back to Manila and retiring there. One day he told me he'll be going to Vietnam to teach English to underprivileged students, and then I realized he was serious about his desire to teach and give back. When he came back, he worked on his teaching license and then started looking for jobs. Doc Romy comes up with his almost impossible ideas, and sometimes akala mo it's just a whim of the moment. Then he surprised me again when he told me he got hired to teach English to inmates who are working on their GED, which is the equivalent of a high school diploma here in the US. He eventually moved to New Mexico where he was employed as a correctional English teacher. I admired him for his passion and compassion. I would never have half the courage nor the patience that he demonstrated when he made that decision. Doc Romy and I were prayer partners. He would always ask me to pray for him so he can have wisdom in all the decisions he made, even his decision to move to a new state all by himself. I was always worried about him, especially during COVID. We would usually talk for hours during weekends, and our conversations were about his before and afters. His memories of his glory days, how he loved to dance, and his future plans. He planned to go to Manila to have his 80th birthday blast. He constantly said he needed to start practicing so he can dance the night away again. During those days when he became sick, I would remind him, Doc, hang on, magpapaparty ka pa, uuwi pa tayo, sasayaw ka pa. And then one day I stopped hearing back from him. It took me a while to finally gather my thoughts about him and write this eulogy. He was my friend and my brother in Christ. Today is my birthday here in the US. It's kind of painful that on my birthday, I'm actually openly sharing my grief about losing a dear friend. But I want to remember Doc Romy not with tears but with joy. He who had loved life so much, had wanted to give back so much, had never told me that he was ever lonely. He just keeps waking up every morning and wondering how God will continue to use his talent, his time, and his treasure. Doc Romy, I will never forget you and your legacy. Sabi mo sa akin before when I asked you, why did you want to write about the movie stars of the 60s? And you replied, kasi baka makalimutan na sila. We need to put our collective memory so that people will not forget how they once upon a time shined. Today, that's what we're doing. Remembering how you, my dear friend, had one way or another touched our lives. How you had once laughed, danced, and shined. Thank you, Protacio and Torres family, for allowing me to share my precious memories of him. Now, Romy, you will always be in our hearts.